The auctioneer's gavel cracked like thunder across the dusty arena. But before the echo could fade, something extraordinary happened that would change 3 lives forever. Sold to Mr. Chadwick Vandermeer for $2 million. The words had barely left the auctioneer's lips when the magnificent stallion, coal-black Arabian with eyes like liquid fire, reared up on his hind legs and let out a cry that silenced the entire crowd. But this wasn't just any cry. It was a sound of pure defiance, of wild freedom refusing to be caged by money. Chadwick Vandermeer, oil tycoon and collector of the world's most expensive everything, stood in his private viewing box with a satisfied smirk. At 62, he had bought countries' worth of art, yachts longer than city blocks, and enough rare animals to stock a zoo. This horse, Storm Chaser, was to be the crown jewel of his Kentucky estate, another trophy to display his wealth. But Storm Chaser had other plans. The moment the stable hands approached with the golden halter, worth more than most people's cars, the stallion's muscles coiled like springs. His nostrils flared as he scanned the crowd, searching for something or someone. His gaze swept past the millionaires in their pressed suits, past the professional trainers with their practiced hands, past everyone who saw him as a commodity. Then his eyes found her. 19-year-old Magnolia Westbrook sat in the cheaper seats, so high up she needed binoculars to see the horses clearly. Her sun-weathered hands gripped the metal railing as she watched the drama unfold below. She hadn't come to bid. Her family's farm barely made enough to keep food on the table, let alone spend millions on a horse. She'd come because her late grandfather had whispered stories about Storm Chaser, about how this wasn't just any horse, but a descendant of the legendary wild mustangs that once ruled the American plains. That horse has magic in his blood, Maggie. Her grandfather had told her on his deathbed. One day, you'll understand what I mean. Storm Chaser's eyes locked onto hers across the vast arena. Time seemed to stop. The chatter of the crowd faded. The auctioneer's voice became a distant hum. In that moment, something passed between the wild stallion and the farmer's daughter, recognition that went beyond words, beyond logic, beyond anything the wealthy spectators could understand. The horse suddenly bolted. Security guards scattered as Storm Chaser leaped over the arena barrier with impossible grace. Screams echoed through the amphitheater as 2,000 pounds of pure power and determination charged through the crowd. But he wasn't running wild, he was running toward something. Toward someone. Chadwick Vandermeer's face turned crimson as his $2 million investment galloped away from him. "Stop that horse," he bellowed, his voice cracking with fury. "I own him." But ownership, Magnolia realized as Storm Chaser thundered up the concrete steps toward her, was something this magnificent creature would never accept. He reached her section and stopped, his sides heaving, his dark eyes never leaving her face. Around them, chaos reigned as security guards shouted orders and terrified spectators climbed over seats to get away. Magnolia slowly stood up, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She extended her hand, palm up, the way her grandfather had taught her to approach horses. Storm Chaser stepped forward and pressed his velvet muzzle into her palm. The connection was electric, undeniable, and it changed everything. The arena fell silent, except for the heavy breathing of the stallion and the rapid heartbeat of the girl who had somehow tamed the untamable. Security guards surrounded them, but none dared approach. They had all seen what this horse could do, and the way he positioned himself protectively in front of Magnolia made it clear that any threat to her would be met with devastating force. Chadwick Vandermeer pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the concrete steps as he climbed toward the impossible scene before him. Behind him trailed his entourage, lawyers, bodyguards, and Dr. Cornelius Ashworth, the world's most expensive horse trainer. Young Lady Vandermeer's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Step away from my property immediately. Magnolia didn't move. Her hand remained on Stormchaser's neck, feeling the powerful muscles beneath his midnight coat. He's not property, she said quietly, but her voice carried in the stillness. He's choosing to be here. I have a bill of sale for $2 million that says otherwise. Vandermeer pulled out his phone. I can have you arrested for theft, obstruction, and you can have a bill of sale for the moon, Magnolia interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. That doesn't make it yours if it won't come when you call. Dr. Ashworth stepped forward, his weathered hands steady despite his 70 years of experience with difficult horses. He had gentled stallions for kings and presidents, but something about this situation felt different. Miss, I understand your connection with the animal, but legally, Stormchaser's head snapped toward the approaching trainer, ears pinned back in warning. A low rumble emerged from his chest, and every person within 50 feet took an involuntary step backward. Perhaps, Dr. Ashworth continued carefully, we could discuss this more civilly. What's your name, young lady? Magnolia Westbrook. She lifted her chin, channeling every ounce of strength her grandfather had instilled in her. And this horse knows me. Impossible, Vandermeer scoffed. I researched his bloodline extensively. He's never been handled by humans. He was captured just 6 months ago from the Nevada wild herds. My grandfather used to tell me stories, Magnolia said, her voice growing stronger, about a stallion who escaped from a cavalry unit during the Civil War. A black Arabian who fled into the wilderness and started a line of horses that could never be truly tamed, horses that chose their own riders. The crowd had grown silent, drawn in by her words. Even the security guards seemed to lean forward to listen. He said that horses' descendants carried something in their blood, a wildness that couldn't be bought or sold. They could only be earned. Magnolia's eyes never left Stormchaser's as she spoke. My great-great-grandmother was the last person one of these horses chose. She was a Cherokee woman who understood that some bonds go deeper than ownership and operate. Laugh was harsh and dismissive. Fairy tales and folklore. This is the 21st century, not some romantic Western novel. I paid for this horse, and I'm taking him home. He signaled to his security team, but before they could move, something remarkable happened. 3 more horses in the holding pens below began calling out wild, haunting sounds that seemed to echo Magnolia's story. These were Stormchaser's relatives, captured from the same herd, and they were responding to something they recognized. In the air, Dr. Ashworth frowned, his experienced mind processing what he was witnessing. In 50 years of training, he had never seen horses react like this to a human they had supposedly never met. Mr. Vandermeer, he said slowly, perhaps we should consider nothing. Vandermeer's patience finally snapped. I don't care if she's some horse whisperer. I don't care about Cherokee legends or magical bloodlines. I bought this animal, and I'm taking possession now. But as his security team began to advance, Stormchaser did something that made everyone freeze. He stepped protectively in front of Magnolia and let out a call that seemed to shake the very foundations of the arena. It was answered immediately by every horse on the property, a chorus of wild voices that spoke of freedom. of choice, and of bonds that money could never break. The battle lines were drawn, and the war for Stormchaser's soul was about to begin. The arena had transformed into a battlefield of wills, with Magnolia and Stormchaser at the center of a storm that threatened to tear apart everything Chadwick Vandermeer believed about power and possession. The millionaire's face had gone from red to purple as he watched his $2 million investment nuzzle the palm of a girl who probably didn't have $200 to her name. "This is ridiculous," Vandermeer snarled, pulling out his platinum phone. "I'm calling the sheriff. I'll have this place shut down for breach of contract." But before he could dial, a new voice cut through the tension. "Now hold on just a minute there, Chadwick." The crowd parted as a tall, silver-haired man in worn jeans and a weathered cowboy hat made his way up the steps. This was Beauregard Bo Hutchinson, the auction house owner and a legend in horse circles. At 75, he had seen everything the equine world could throw at him, but nothing quite like this. "Bo, I'm warning you." Vandermeer's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Don't interfere with my business transaction." Bo Hutchinson had built his reputation on fairness and honor, values that had made him wealthy in ways that went beyond money. He studied the scene before him: the defiant stallion, the determined girl, and the furious millionaire. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He smiled. "Well now, Chadwick, seems to me we might have ourselves a situation here that calls for some old-fashioned problem-solving." Bo's weathered hands rested on his belt buckle as he addressed the crowd. "In all my years of selling horses, I've learned one thing. You can't make a horse love someone with money. You earn that with something else entirely." "I don't want his love," Vandermeer snapped. "I want my property." "But what if," Bo continued, his eyes twinkling with mischief, "what if that property doesn't want to be owned? What if we let the horse decide for himself?" Dr. Ashworth stepped forward, intrigued despite himself. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Bo, a challenge." Bo's voice carried across the silent arena. 3 days from now, we hold a competition, Mr. Vandermeer. You bring your best trainer, your finest equipment, everything money can buy. Young Miss Westbrook here, she comes as she is. We turn Stormchaser loose in the main arena, and we see who he chooses to follow. The crowd began to murmur with excitement. In all the years of horse auctions, nothing like this had ever been attempted. Vandermeer's laugh was cold and calculating. "You want me to risk $2 million on some county fair horse show?" "Not risk," Bo corrected. "Prove. You say you own this horse. Well, ownership means the horse accepts your authority. If he chooses you, nobody can argue with that. But if he chooses Miss Westbrook," Bo let the implication hang in the air, "and what does she get if she wins?" Vandermeer's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but the millionaire waved him away. "She gets the horse," Bo said simply. Free and clear. Magnolia's knees nearly buckled. "Mr. Hutchinson, I couldn't possibly. My family doesn't have that kind of money too." "Didn't say anything about money, child. Sometimes the most valuable things in life can't be bought at any price." Bo turned back to Vandermeer. "So what do you say, Chadwick? You confident enough in your ownership to let the horse prove it?" Vandermeer's mind raced. He could walk away now, take his expensive horse, and let his lawyers handle any resistance. But the challenge had been issued publicly in front of hundreds of witnesses and news cameras that had arrived to cover the record-breaking sale. To back down now would make him look weak, afraid of a teenage farm girl. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. But when I win, and I will win, I want that girl prosecuted for interfering with my property. I want this circus shut down, and I want everyone to remember what happens when people try to make a fool of Chadwick Vandermeer. But as he spoke those words, Stormchaser moved closer to Magnolia, as if sensing the threat. The stallion's dark eyes never left Vandermeer's face, and in them, the millionaire saw something that made his blood run cold. He saw a horse who had never been defeated, never been broken, and never been owned by anyone. The challenge was set. But the real battle was just beginning. The 3 days between the challenge and the showdown passed like a whirlwind of preparation, media attention, and growing tension. News of the unprecedented contest between the millionaire and the farmer's daughter had spread across the country, drawing reporters, horse enthusiasts, and curious spectators from hundreds of miles away. Chadwick Vandermeer had transformed the situation into a military operation. He chartered private jets to bring in renowned horse trainers from 3 continents, spent another $100,000 on specialized equipment, and had his publicity team spin the story as a demonstration of why proper resources and expertise mattered in the equine world. Dr. Ashworth worked around the clock with a team of specialists, studying every piece of footage of Stormchaser's behavior, analyzing his bloodline, and developing strategies to establish dominance and control. They brought in exotic treats, custom-made halters embedded with silver and gold, and sound equipment to play specific frequencies that were supposed to calm aggressive horses. This is about showing the world that sentimentalism has no place. In serious horse training, Vandermeer told the assembled media on the 2nd day, "That girl may have gotten lucky with some temporary connection, but real horsemanship requires knowledge, experience, and proper resources." Meanwhile, Magnolia faced a very different kind of preparation. She had returned to her family's struggling farm, a modest spread of 40 acres where her father, Jedediah Westbrook, raised a small herd of quarter horses and barely managed to make ends meet. The media attention had been overwhelming. Reporters camped outside their property, and the phone rang constantly with interview requests and offers from sponsors wanting to capitalize on the David versus Goliath story. "Maggie, honey, you sure about this?" her father asked on the evening before the challenge. They sat on the porch swing that her grandfather had built 40 years earlier, watching the sun set over their modest pastures. "This Vandermeer fellow, he's got resources we can't even imagine. Maybe it would be better to just let him have the horse and avoid all this trouble." But Magnolia's resolve had only grown stronger over the past 3 days. She had spent hours each evening at the auction facility where Bo Hutchinson had allowed her to visit Stormchaser in his temporary stall. The connection between them had deepened with each encounter. The horse would calm instantly when she appeared, pressing his forehead against hers in a gesture that spoke of trust and recognition that went beyond training or technique. "Daddy, you didn't see the way he looked at me," she said softly. "It wasn't just a horse seeing a human. It was like he was seeing someone he'd been waiting for his whole life." Her younger brother, Carver, only 16 but wise beyond his years, joined them on the porch. "Grandpa always said the horses in that bloodline chose their own people." "Maybe it's true. Maybe it is," Jedediah acknowledged. "But even if it is, what happens if you win? We can't afford to keep a horse like that. The insurance alone would bankrupt us." It was a question that had kept Magnolia awake for the past 2 nights. If she somehow won the challenge, she would own a horse worth millions of dollars but have no way to properly care for him. Their farm was already struggling, and adding the responsibility of such a valuable animal seemed impossible. But every time she started to doubt herself, she remembered the moment in the arena when Stormchaser had chosen her over $2 million of wealth and prestige. Some connections, she was beginning to understand, transcended practical considerations. On the final evening before the challenge, she received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Ashworth arrived at their farm alone, driving a modest rental car instead of Vandermoor's usual convoy of luxury vehicles. "Miss Westbrook," he said as she met him at the gate, "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I wanted to speak with you privately." They walked to the pasture fence where 3 of her family's horses grazed peacefully in the evening light. Dr. Ashworth studied them with a professional eye, noting their condition and the obvious care they received despite the family's limited resources. "In 50 years of training horses, I've never encountered anything like what I witnessed 3 days ago," he said finally. "I've been thinking about what you said, about bloodlines and choices and connections that go beyond ownership." Magnolia remained silent, sensing he had more to say. "I want you to understand something," Dr. Ashworth continued. "Tomorrow, Mr. Vandermeer expects me to use every technique at my disposal to establish dominance over that stallion. He's paying me a considerable sum to prove that money and expertise can overcome whatever bond you formed, and will you?" Magnolia asked quietly. Dr. Ashworth was quiet for a long moment, watching the horses in the pasture. "I've spent my entire career believing that proper training and technique could handle any horse. But that stallion, there's something different about him. Something that makes me think maybe your grandfather's stories aren't just folklore after all." As he prepared to leave, he turned back to her one final time. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Miss Westbrook, don't let anyone convince you that what you felt in that arena wasn't real. Sometimes the most important truths can't be measured or bought." The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just who owned Stormchaser, but what ownership really meant. Dawn broke crisp and clear on the day that would change everything. By sunrise, the auction facility was surrounded by news vans, spectators, and horse enthusiasts from across the country. The main arena had been transformed into a neutral testing ground, a circular space with high walls and soft footing, large enough for a horse to run free but contained enough to ensure safety. Chadwick Vandermeer arrived in a caravan that looked more like a presidential motorcade. 3 black SUVs, a equipment truck, and a luxury RV that served as his mobile command center. His team unloaded thousands of dollars worth of specialized gear, training tools, cameras to record every angle, and even a veterinarian standing by to examine Stormchaser for any signs of injury or drugging. Magnolia arrived in her father's 20-year-old pickup truck, wearing the same jeans and boots she had worn to the original auction. She carried nothing but a small leather pouch that had belonged to her great-great-grandmother, containing what looked like simple herbs and stones. The rules were straightforward. Stormchaser would be released into the arena alone. Each contestant would have 30 minutes to interact with him, attempting to establish trust, leadership, and willingness to follow. The horse's choice would be determined by his behavior, which person he approached, who he allowed to touch him, and ultimately, who he would follow when given the choice. Bo Hutchinson served as judge, along with 2 other respected horsemen, who had driven in specifically for the event. The crowd filled every available seat, and television cameras broadcast the event live across multiple networks. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bo announced, his voice carrying across the arena, "what you're about to witness is something that's never been attempted before. This isn't about trick training or fancy techniques. This is about letting a horse choose his own destiny. Dr. Ashworth went first. He entered the arena with confidence built over 5 decades of experience. His approach was methodical and professionally moved slowly, spoke in low, soothing tones, and carried treats that cost more per pound than most people spent on groceries. Stormchaser watched him from the center of the arena, alert but not aggressive. For 20 minutes, Dr. Ashworth demonstrated every technique in his considerable arsenal. He used body language to establish dominance, offered high-value rewards, and employed breathing exercises designed to calm anxious horses. Stormchaser allowed him to approach within 10 feet, accepted a few treats, and even permitted brief contact along his neck. The crowd was impressed. Dr. Ashworth had clearly established a working relationship with the stallion, and when he attempted to lead Stormchaser around the arena, the horse followed for several steps before stopping. "Remarkable work," Bo announced as Dr. Ashworth's time expired. "Now let's see what Miss Westbrook can do." Magnolia entered the arena with her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. Unlike Dr. Ashworth's confident stride, she walked slowly, almost hesitantly, toward the center where Stormchaser waited. But the moment the stallion saw her, everything changed. His head came up, his ears pricked forward, and he let out a low whicker of recognition. Without any invitation or encouragement, he walked directly to her, covering the distance between them in powerful, purposeful strides. The crowd fell silent as Stormchaser pressed his forehead against Magnolia's chest, a gesture of trust and submission that brought tears to the eyes of everyone who understood horses. For the next 30 minutes, the arena became a place of magic. Magnolia didn't use treats or equipment or professional techniques. Instead, she opened the leather pouch and sprinkled a small amount of sage and sweetgrass on her palm's herbs her great-great-grandmother had used to communicate with horses. The scent seemed to transport Stormchaser to another time and place, and his behavior shifted from mere acceptance to something approaching reverence. She whispered to him in a mixture of English and Cherokee words her grandmother had taught her, phrases that spoke of partnership rather than dominance, of mutual respect rather than ownership. Stormchaser responded by following her around the arena without any lead rope or halter, matching her pace perfectly, stopping when she stopped, turning when she turned. But the true test came when Bo Hutchinson opened both gates to the arena. Simultaneously, Stormchaser is free to leave with either person, Bo announced, or to choose neither. The decision is entirely his. Dr. Ashworth positioned himself at one gate, calling to the stallion and offering his most tempting treats. His technique was flawless, his presentation professional and appealing. Magnolia stood at the opposite gate, empty-handed except for the wisdom passed down through generations of her family. She didn't call to Stormchaser or try to influence his decision. She simply waited, trusting in a connection that went deeper than any training manual could explain. For a long moment, Stormchaser stood in the center of the arena, looking between his two options. The crowd held its breath as $2 million hung in the balance. Then, with a decision that seemed to surprise no one except Chadwick Vandermeer, Stormchaser walked calmly to Magnolia's side and followed her out of the arena. The roar of the crowd was deafening, but all Magnolia could hear was the steady rhythm of hoofbeats beside her as she walked toward a future she never could have imagined. The aftermath of Stormchaser's choice created a whirlwind that threatened to overwhelm everyone involved. Chadwick Vandermeer's face had gone from purple to white as he watched. $2 million walk away with a 19-year-old girl who didn't have 2 million cents to her name. This is fraud, he screamed at Bo Hutchinson, his voice cracking with rage and disbelief. This was a setup. You people conspired to steal my horse. But Bo's response was calm and measured. The horse made his choice, Chadwick. In front of 500 witnesses and a dozen television cameras, your own trainer had the same opportunity to establish a connection. Dr. Ashworth, to his credit, approached Magnolia with dignity intact. Miss Westbrook, I've been training horses for 50 years, and I've never seen anything like what just happened in there. Whatever connection you have with that stallion, it's something that can't be taught or bought. The legal implications hit everyone simultaneously. Vandermeer owned Stormchaser according to the bill of sale, but the challenge had been witnessed and recorded. His lawyers huddled frantically, trying to determine if the contest constituted a legal transfer of ownership or merely a publicity stunt. But while the adults argued about contracts and legalities, Magnolia faced a more immediate problem. She now had possession of a horse worth more than her family's farm, with no way to properly care for him and no legal guarantee that she could keep him. That's when the second miracle of the day occurred. Dr. Ashworth pulled her aside as the crowd began to disperse. Miss Westbrook, I have a proposition for you. I've been thinking about retiring from competitive training and perhaps focusing on more ... meaningful work. Your family's farm would you be interested in a partner? Magnolia's eyes widened. Dr. Ashworth, we couldn't afford you, misunderstand, he interrupted with a gentle smile. I've made more money in my career than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. What I lack is purpose. That stallion chose you for reasons that go beyond anything I understand, but I'd like to learn. I'd like to help you build something special on your family's land. The offer was extraordinary. Dr. Ashworth wanted to invest in expanding the Westbrook farm into a sanctuary for horses like Stormchaser, animals with wild bloodlines that needed understanding rather than breaking, partnership rather than domination. But the legal battle with Vandermeer was far from over. The Millionaire's team filed injunctions and lawsuits, claiming the contest was invalid and demanding the immediate return of his property. For 3 weeks, Stormchaser remained in a legal limbo at Bo Hutchinson's facility while lawyers fought in courtrooms and the media followed every development. The turning point came when a genealogy expert hired by Vandermeer's team made a startling discovery. While researching Stormchaser's bloodline to strengthen their client's ownership claim, they uncovered records showing that the stallion was indeed descended from horses that had belonged to Cherokee families in the 1800s families that had been forcibly relocated during the Trail of Tears under a little-known federal law designed to protect Native American cultural artifacts. Horses with documented tribal heritage could be claimed by their ancestral communities. The Cherokee Nation, intrigued by the story and the historical connection, filed their own legal claim for Stormchaser. The 3-way legal battle created a media sensation, but it also created an opportunity for an unprecedented solution. The Cherokee Nation's attorney, a brilliant woman named Justice Ravensong, proposed a settlement that would honor all parties' interests. The tribe would officially claim Stormchaser, but immediately place him in a cultural preservation program. Magnolia would serve as his primary caretaker, with Dr. Ashworth providing expertise and funding. Vandermeer would receive a full refund of his purchase price, plus compensation for his legal expenses. Most importantly, Stormchaser would become the foundation stallion for a new program, dedicated to preserving and protecting the bloodlines of horses with Native American heritage. The farm would serve as both a sanctuary and an educational center, teaching people about the historical relationship between indigenous peoples and horses. It was a solution that gave everyone something they needed, even if it wasn't exactly what they had originally wanted. 6 months later, Magnolia stood in the main pasture of the newly renamed Westbrook-Hashworth Heritage Horse Sanctuary, watching Stormchaser graze peacefully alongside 3 mares who carried similar bloodlines. The farm had been transformed with Dr. Ashworth's investment, but it retained the simple, honest character that had attracted the stallion in the first place. Visitors came from around the world to learn about the program and witness the bond between Magnolia and the horse who had chosen her over millions of dollars. But for Magnolia, the most satisfying moments were the quiet ones early mornings when she and Stormchaser walked the fence lines together, or evenings when he would rest his great head against her shoulder as the sun set over the rolling pastures. Chadwick Vandermeer, surprisingly, had become one of the sanctuary's largest donors. The experience had taught him something about the difference between owning and belonging, and while he never admitted it publicly, his friends noticed that he seemed more interested in supporting causes than collecting trophies. Dr. Ashworth found the purpose he had been seeking, working with young people who showed natural connections with difficult horses. His reputation grew in an entirely new direction, not as a trainer who could break any horse, but as a teacher who could help horses and humans find each other. And Stormchaser, he had found exactly what he had been searching for in that arena 6 months earlier, not an owner, but a partner. Not someone who would control him, but someone who would run free beside him. As Magnolia watched him now playing with the other horses in the golden evening light, she understood what her grandfather had meant about magic in the bloodline. It wasn't about supernatural powers or mystical connections. It was about recognizing that some bonds couldn't be forced or bought. They could only be offered freely and accepted with trust. The millionaire had shouted, "Sold," but the wild horse had chosen love, and in making that choice, he had changed. All their lives forever. Sometimes the most valuable things in life were the ones that chose you back.